Hey, this is Brewbird. Welcome back to the channel for all things fermented, brewed, and distilled. If you keep up with this channel, then you'll know I mainly talk about producing alcohol and working in the alcohol industry. But alcohol is produced through fermentation. So I've recently gotten more and more interested in the world of fermentation and just exploring that more. As well, I've noticed a lot of food waste. And I thought to myself, hey, maybe we can use the transformative power of fermentation to extend the shelf life of our produce, such as these clearance bin apples I have here. So this project is called Just Ferment It. And at the end of this project, my goal is that we can come up with a recipe or a product that we can take to the stores and try to get on grocery store shelves to sell. And also through this series, I'd like to explore how we can better preserve our groceries when we're at home. And we have things that are starting to go off, and instead of just tossing it away in the compost, let's see what we can do with it. 'Cause baby, like, it's all another. Thank you to Latincouver for sponsoring this fermentation project with a $5,000 grant. I started this project by going to my local Walmart to the clearance section where I found some produce that was about to go off. After I brought the clearance produce home, I wondered how safe it was to ferment produce that's starting to go off and is not in the peak of freshness. So I asked Sian Wang, Associate Professor of Food, Nutrition and Health at UBC.
Fermentation is an excellent way actually for food preservation, because during fermentation many things are happening actually to inhibit the pathogenic or the spoilage microorganisms. So one thing obviously is with regarding the production of lactic acid. And we're talking about fermentation by lactic acid bacteria. So the acid will actually lower the pH of the food, and then that's one way to achieve preservation. They also introduce competitions to whatever is presenting on the foods that you're using. Potentially, they will compete. Whatever you're using as a starter culture will be competing with the harmful bacteria for resources, and therefore achieving the goal of food preservation. And also sometimes these starter cultures will produce bacteriocins, for example, they are basically short-chain amino acids that are able to kill the harmful bacteria. But again, it really comes to the question of what specific fermentation you're thinking of using. Fermentation is, among many other examples, one of the best and ways, and probably one way that has been used for thousands of years to extend the shelf life of our food products. So for example, if you turn grapes into wine, then the wines are gonna run so much longer time compared to the grapes. So yeah, fermentation is an excellent way to extend the shelf life.
While there are several types of fermentation, alcohol fermentation being one of them, I decided to start this project off by doing a lactic acid fermentation. And this is when yeast or strains of bacteria convert starches or sugars into lactic acid. This method makes sauerkraut, pickles, and kimchi. A lacto-fermentation involves submerging vegetables and fruits in a brine solution, which is made of salts and water, or salting them to release their own water and create their own brine. The first lacto-ferment I made was with apples. So I peeled 6 medium apples and I cut away any brown or soft spots that are going bad and mushy. Then I removed the core and cubed the apples into nice chunky pieces. And I stuck the apples into these small jars here. And then I dissolve 1 tablespoon of natural sea salt in 4 cups of water, and the water is room temperature. To that salted brine, I'll mix in 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon, and I'll just mix until the ground cinnamon is well combined. I'll also add in the juice of an entire lemon. Into each of my mason jars with the apples, I'll throw in 3 cloves into each jar, and I'll pour the brine that I made into every jar until all the apples are submerged in liquid. And it's important that all the produce is submerged in liquid, otherwise you might get mold developing on the top where it's exposed to air. My next lacto-ferment was this head of cauliflower, and again you can see it's not so great looking on the top. It's got some brown bits, but that's easy to fix. I just shave off the brown bits and the rest of it looks perfect. And I'll cut up this head of cauliflower into cauliflower florets. Again, I'll pack it tightly into the jars. I make a brine with 4 cups of water, or 1 liter of water. And I'll dissolve 2 tablespoons of natural salt into it to make our salted brine. And I'll also peel 3 garlic cloves and I'll smash those up, and 1 garlic clove will go into each jar. I pour the brine over top until the cauliflower is all submerged, screw the top on, and that's it. I also made a jar of lacto-fermented eggplants, which I picked up in the clearance section. And these are Indian eggplants, so they're smaller in size. You can see there's some mold growing on them already, but again, that's easy enough to fix. I'll just cut it all off. I salted the 3 pounds of eggplants that I had with 3 tablespoons of salt, and I let it sit for 2 hours, and that's just so the salt will draw out the moisture in the eggplants, and this moisture from the eggplants will create the brine that we need to brine the eggplants in. While I was waiting for the salt to draw out the water from the eggplants, I also created a brine for them. So this brine was 2 tablespoons of salt and 4 cups of water again. Once the 2 hours are over, you can see the eggplants are nice and softened. Some of the water has come out, and you can use this eggplant juice as part of your brine. Into each of the jars, I put in 1 teaspoon of cracked black pepper, 1 teaspoon of Aleppo pepper or red pepper for a bit of spiciness, and 1 teaspoon of oregano. And I also put a smashed garlic piece into each mason jar as well. Then I stuffed the eggplant inside the jars. I stuffed the eggplants in very tightly so there's no air pockets there. And then I filled up the jars with the brine until the eggplants were fully submerged. I let all these lacto-ferments ferment for 7 days, and every other day I would burp the jars, and that's just opening the top cap and letting some of the gas, the carbon dioxide gas that's being created through the fermentation, escape out. Otherwise, if we don't burp the jars and let the gas escape, then the jars could explode and liquid will start leaking out of the jars and making a mess everywhere. So be sure, if you're going to do this, to burp your jars. Ah! Holy shoot! It's fermenting, alright. I tell you what, it's fermenting.
Oh, that's a beautiful color.
It's like I don't know what it tastes like. And we tried these lacto-ferments after 7 days, and they tasted great. The eggplant wasn't very salty. You've got the strong taste of the oregano and some of the red pepper coming through. So they were Italian-style eggplants, and they were still quite juicy and soft. You can see they still look great. They don't look like they're rotten or they've gone bad. They look fresh. The same thing with the apples. They are so crisp after 7 days, and they have a mild cinnamon and clove flavor to them. They have a hint of sweetness and aren't salty. And the apples were a big hit at the library where I did a Just Fermented presentation. The cauliflower had a nice crunchy texture, and it just had a nice clean cauliflower taste to it. I didn't season it with anything. When I burped the jars, it really smelled like farts though, but it tasted good. You may be wondering how a lacto-fermentation works. So the produce already has lactic acid bacteria on it. And when we submerge the fruits and the vegetables in this brine with the salts and the water, it creates really good conditions for the lactic acid bacteria to thrive and grow and outcompete the other microorganisms that are present on the produce. The lactic acid bacteria thrives and grows in this environment, and it takes over, and it creates a nice sour environment inside our jars to preserve and extend the shelf life of our produce. When these lacto-fermented foods are properly prepared and stored in a cool, dark place like the fridge, they can last anywhere from 4 to 18 months. Although it's important that you look for any signs of mold and look at the color to make sure it still looks edible. Another thing to keep in mind is to not use chlorinated water, so that's tap water. Chlorine can inhibit the fermentation process, but it's very easy to remove the chlorine from water. All you have to do is take your tap water and boil it and let it come back down to room temperature, and it will be good to use. Or you can just take your tap water and let it sit for 24 hours at room temperature, and the chlorine will dissipate out into the air over time, and you'll have non-chlorinated water. Most fermentation lovers also advise not to use table salt, which is iodized salt, as that kind of salt has iodine and may have caking agents, which may prevent a successful fermentation. I hope you enjoyed this video and will try lacto-fermenting some of your produce that may be going off or that you just don't know what to do with. Stay tuned for the next video where we'll explore making other types of fermented foods and beverages. In the meantime, please support this channel by giving this video a thumbs up, leaving a comment down below, and hit that subscribe button for more fermentation, brewing, and distilling videos. This is Brewbird, sending good vibes your way. I'll see you next time.